Your turn.
Great, thank you very much. So I'm going to make a point here. My name is Dave Mulryan. I moved to New Mexico as an 8-year-old in 1966. I was here from 1966 to 1976, went by a mere fluke. I got into fancy college in the East. I went to Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts. I'm a big cheer for Worcester. Everybody loves Worcester. And you guys should all be happy about Worcester. The birth control pill was invented there. But as I'm standing behind this table, and then I was in New York from 1983 until 2006 when I came back to New Mexico for aging parent duty. Not duty that you want to do, but you are going to be drafted someday, so you have to be careful. It's going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. That's over. It only ends one way. And but I'm making the point, when I'm standing behind this table, there is a barrier between me and between you. And so when I am registering voters, I do not sit in regal splendor behind the table. You've got to mix and mingle. You've got to get people. You've got to step in front of people. You've got to say, are you registered to vote? If they say yes, give them a sticker. I use little pride stickers. The gays are hot. I don't understand it. The other thing I think that's important to know, how many of you are registered voter registrars right now? How many people, like, just give me a number, how many people have you registered to vote? Anybody? 5, 10, 15?
40.
40. Anybody else?
20.
And Paul, you were making the point about that you were registering 10 people. That's a good number. But here's another number that you should know. There are 14,000 voter registration agents in the state of New Mexico. The Secretary of State tracks them. 10 people registered 90% of the voters. And one of the things that we have to recognize is that you have to find yield. You have to go where you can get a lot of people. My group is called Everybody Votes. I'm going to pass out cards. You can take one. I'm just getting it so that you can get to the name. I have an article on Medium, and I should have brought them, but I don't have them printed out. It says how to be a carnival barker and get everyone registered to vote. Because, so if any of you, how many of you here have grandchildren that are in high school or college or something like that? We're going to need those kids to come and get to be voter registration agents, to drag them down to the Secretary of State, the county clerk in Santa Fe, bribe them, buy them a car, whatever, a McDonald's, whatever it takes, because young people we're discovering don't like to be registered by old people. So I bring young people with me. And we have to look for yield. You have to get to a school. You have to get to a college. You have to get to a community college. If you can get to a bar, I have a server's license so that I can stand behind the bar and register voters. You've got to think outside of the box, because these kids they're anti-government. They don't believe they have a future. They don't believe there's any point in voting. They only want to register as declined to state, which is no party, which can be catastrophic if you're looking at the primary. For how many of you were Bernie fans here? Anybody? So one of the problems that Bernie had is he had so many of his voters were walled off because they were registered as independents, and they were shocked to know that they could not vote in the Democratic primary. And so, we are also the first contact that most people have with democracy. We are the people where they come, you get them registered to vote. You have 5 minutes to give them a crash course in government and their role in it. That's it, because they've had no background. I don't know what happened to the curriculum of the schools. I can't fix that. I can do a quick 5 minutes. Here's why you should vote. And if you don't, I'm going to murder you. We're going to pass this around. I can get you copies of all of this. And I'm going to send around a press release. One of the other things that we've discovered is very effective in voter registration is something that you mentioned. You need to be consistent. If you're going to go to St. Michael's, for example, go every Friday or go every Thursday, because you build. And and you have to put a thing. If you get a kid that comes up and registers to vote, and that kid seems talented and not shy and they're willing to help other kids, grab them, drive them down to the county clerk's office, get them to be a VRA. If you can talk to a professor that will give kids some sort of school credit for registering to vote, that's great. The requirements for being a voter registration agent in the state of New Mexico are very easy. You don't have to be 18. You don't have to be a citizen. You really can get like 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds can become VRAs. So you should encourage that, because if you have a kid who's 14, you're going to get them out there interacting with 18-year-olds, and it's going to be a young person's game. Here's a couple of other numbers for you. There was a baby boom in the 90s. We don't know what's going on. Everyone was happy, the economy was good, everyone reproduced very quickly. So going back 4 years, 4 million people a year were turning 18. Going forward 6 years, 4 million kids a year are turning 18. As we live and breathe right now, we've got 4 million kids turning 18 in this year. That is a bulge of voters larger than the baby boom, if you can imagine. If we can get all of those kids going, we can have a tremendous outcome. Tufts University, which is fancy college outside of Boston, they did an exit poll on the first-time voter. What they discovered was, regardless of how the people had registered to vote, 67% of them voted for Democrats. So don't worry that you're registering for the other side. What you're doing is, a young voter is probably going to vote Democratic. 67% so 67 out of every 100 are going to vote for Democrats. How many of you here are on Instagram? Anybody? Okay, because when you look at how you communicate with millennials, first of all, they never answer their phone. They just refuse. I mean, they might text, they might answer a text. They like Instagram and they like videos that are under 30 seconds. And the rule is, for every 10 seconds you go over 10 seconds, you lose a certain percent of the audience. So again, a grandchild or a child that's under the age of 20, a 14-year-old girl is perfect, can show you how to use Instagram. You need to start using it. Do not be afraid, just plunge in and try it. I mean, I'm too old to be doing this, I'm 61, but I can channel an 18-year-old teenage boy if I need to. That's what we're going to have to do. And now, here's a number to scare you. Last week, the Republicans announced 2 major voter initiatives. $20 million is going to be spent by the Republican National Committee to register voters in their swing states, places like Ohio, places like Alabama, places like Georgia. And over the weekend, we had an announcement. These are Texans, you know how they are. They are going to raise another $20 million to register voters specifically in Texas, hoping to increase their lead. Another thing to remember, if we look at how we did from the voter turnout in 2016 when Donald Trump was elected, 48% of eligible voters went and voted. And now we get to the midterms. We've got Indivisible. We've got lots of people running around going, we're going to save the world. Voting rates did not indicate this interest. We had a 5% increase. So we went from 48% to 53%. That is pathetic. We have nearly 47% of the country not voting. And one of the #1 things that we hear from people, I'm not shy, and if someone says I don't want to register, I'll say, why don't you want to register? The #1 thing I hear is, I don't know enough to make any decisions. And I'm like, you don't need to know anything. If you like how they look, you can vote. But you know, one of the things that we're discovering is that you as the voter registration agent, you as the person that's going to get them, you are their first contact with democracy. Don't blow it. You know, you need to be able to tell them in Santa Fe, when is your next election? November 5th? It's like, yeah. And what is city election? City election. City councilors, board of ed. School board. So if you're a registering voter, you need to say, and you are eligible to vote November 5th this year, I believe it is, right? So you can tell them on the spot, you have 6 months. And if they say, but I don't know anything, you're going to say, well, I agree, but that's not the point. But then, you can say, you can find out what tell them. Talk to your friends, talk to your parents. On Instagram, at the 2018 elections, we had, for the first time ever, intense peer pressure. I have a 24-year-old niece, and she called me and she goes, I have to go vote, they're driving me crazy. I'm like, well, great, who's driving you crazy? She said, my peers. Everyone's on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Snapchat. I know all of these things sound foreign. It's not as hard as it sounds. But they're telling us we have to vote, we have to vote, we have to vote. If we can get that group of people voting, we are home free. We are just home free. We're not going to get Richard Nixon, we're going to get George McGovern, because the last time we had it was when the baby boomers were young. I know it was a long time ago, I was there actually, but so it is all about the young. But it's not just about registering them, it's about making them understand it is their government. I wrote a brochure, 10 reasons you should vote. And I think that it's really up to us to tell them, choose the future, because if they let us choose it, they're going to die. I mean, there's just no question it's going to be global warming or Ebola. Take your pick. I mean, and they need to understand the only power that they have is to vote, and they have to know what they're doing. And you can't vote unless you're registered. You have to register. And I think if you can get them to critical mass, we ran a voter drive at UNM, which called 100 Days of Voting. And so it was a few less than 100 days, but we had 300 kids registered in about 4 weeks. So you've got to sell it, you've got to package it, you've got to PR it, you've got to say, and I will tell you, sex sells. I once registered 112 people at Pride because I had a stripper standing next to me. I mean, it was a male stripper, but a stripper nonetheless. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I'm a gay guy, like I've stood next to a lot of strippers, but you have to keep an open mind. The means, in the end, justifies the means in getting people registered to vote. Cliff, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, sir.
And I gave you all a card.